I built my life from nothing, only for my stepfather to emerge with a new will claiming he was my guardian and deserved it all. And hey everyone, this is a bit of a mess, and I honestly don't know where to begin. My life has always been a series of uphill battles, but I thought I'd finally reached a point where I could breathe. Turns out, I might have been wrong. Let me backtrack. My name's Connor, I'm 28, and for the first time in my life, things were actually looking up. I grew up dirt poor. My mom, Rachel, worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. My dad? Never knew him. Instead, there was Jack, my stepfather. He came into the picture when I was about 10. At first, I thought he'd be this great father figure. But Jack wasn't a dad. He was a tyrant. He never hit me or anything. But the emotional abuse? That was his specialty. Constantly telling me I'd never amount to anything, mocking every dream I had. My mom tried to stand up for me, but Jack always found a way to shut her down, using guilt or money to control her. I remember the day she married him. He gave this big speech about family and how he'd always have our backs. Lies. All lies. When I turned 18, I left and never looked back. Jack didn't care. He told me I was a waste of space and that he was glad to be rid of me. My mom passed away 5 years ago, and Jack didn't even bother to call me until the funeral. That was the last time I saw him, until a week ago. Since leaving, I've clawed my way to where I am now. It wasn't easy. I worked dead-end jobs, studied at community college, and eventually started my own tech company. It took years of blood, sweat, and tears, but now, I've built something I'm proud of. I live comfortably, have a great girlfriend, Hannah, and I thought I'd left my past behind me. Then Jack showed up at my office. I was in the middle of a meeting when my assistant, Lauren, knocked on the door, looking nervous. She said a man claiming to be family was demanding to see me. My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard from Jack in years, and now he was here? Why? I stepped out into the lobby, and there he was, leaning casually against the reception desk like he owned the place. Jack hadn't changed much. Still had that cocky smirk, the same arrogant posture. But there was something new in his eyes, a calculated sharpness I didn't trust. "Connor," he said, dragging out my name like we were old pals. "Look at you. Big office, fancy suit. I always knew you had potential. Jack, what do you want?" I cut straight to the point. No small talk. No pleasantries. He gave me this fake, wounded look. "Is that any way to talk to your old man?" "You're not my dad." He laughed, low and cold. "Fair enough. But I am your stepfather, and I think we need to talk." Against my better judgment, I agreed to hear him out, if only to get him out of my office. We sat in one of the conference rooms, and Jack wasted no time getting to the point. "You've done well for yourself, Connor. Real well. I'm impressed." "Thanks," I said, not bothering to hide my irritation. "What do you want?" "Well, here's the thing," he said, leaning forward. "Your mother and we had an understanding. When she passed, she left a will. And in that will, she made it clear that I was to look after you, your guardian, so to speak. I think you'll agree that I played a significant role in shaping the man you've become." I blinked, stunned. "Are you kidding me?" "Not at all," he said smoothly. "I've got the paperwork to prove it. A new will surfaced recently, one that your mother apparently updated before she died. It states that as your legal guardian, I'm entitled to a portion of your success. After all, I raised you, didn't I?" I was speechless. 1,000 thoughts raced through my head, but one stood out. What kind of game is he playing? "I don't know what fantasy you're living in," I said, my voice shaking with anger, "but you didn't raise me. You made my life hell, and then told me to get lost. I owe you nothing." Jack didn't flinch. In fact, he seemed amused. "Maybe you feel that way, but the law might see things differently. My lawyer will be in touch." With that, he stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked out like he'd just closed a business deal. I sat there, stunned, until Hannah came by to check on me. I told her everything, and she was furious. "He's bluffing," she said. "He has to be." But the next day, I got a letter from Jack's lawyer. It was real. He was really trying to claim a share of my company, my money. Asterisk, asterisk, everything I'd worked for, asterisk, asterisk. I called Marcus, my lawyer, who took one look at the letter and frowned. "This isn't airtight," he said, "but it's not baseless either. If he has a legitimate will, this could get ugly." Ugly didn't even begin to describe it. Jack was trying to stake a claim to my life, and I had no idea how far he'd go to get it. I couldn't believe it. Jack, the man who spent most of my childhood mocking me and undermining everything I did, was now claiming he deserved a piece of my success, as if he had contributed anything to my life besides bitterness and resentment. The days after Jack's visit were a blur. His lawyer's letter was full of vague but troubling language. Phrases like rightful entitlement and financial contributions during formative years. Marcus, my lawyer, was calm but cautious. "This is a scare tactic, Connor," he said over the phone, "but we can't dismiss it outright. If this supposed will is legitimate, we need to see it." The idea of Jack having any leverage over me made my blood boil. I'd worked for years to get to where I was. I'd slept in my car during my early 20s because I couldn't afford rent. I'd skipped meals to save money for coding boot camps. Jack wasn't there for any of it. And now, he had the audacity to show up with some bogus claim? Hannah tried to be supportive, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "You need to be careful," she said one evening as we sat in our apartment. "Jack doesn't seem like the type to back down. If this goes public, it could damage your reputation." She was right. I had investors, employees, and a growing public profile in the tech world. The last thing I needed was a scandal involving some sleazy stepfather trying to take me to court. And then there was Chloe, my younger half-sister. She was just a kid when I left home, only about 7 or 8. I'd always felt guilty for not staying in touch with her, but Jack made it clear I wasn't welcome in their lives. From what I'd seen on social media, Chloe had grown into a smart, driven young woman. She was studying at college now, and I wondered how much she knew about Jack's schemes, or if she'd been dragged into them. 2 days after the lawyer's letter arrived, I got my answer. Chloe called me. It was the first time we'd spoken in years. "Hey, Connor," she said nervously. "I know it's been a while, but can we talk?" Her voice took me back to those early years when she'd follow me around the house, asking endless questions and looking up to me like I was some kind of superhero. I pushed down the pang of guilt and forced a smile. "Of course. What's going on?" She hesitated, then said, "Dad told me what's happening." "About the will." My stomach clenched. "And what did he tell you?" "He said Mom left this updated will, that it gives him some kind of rights over your success. He said he's been reaching out to you, but you've been ignoring him." Of course, Jack would spin it that way. "Chloe, that's not what happened. He showed up at my office out of nowhere and dropped this bomb on me. I haven't seen or heard from him in years. And now he's claiming he deserves part of my company? It's insane." "I thought it sounded weird," she admitted. "But he keeps saying it's what Mom would have wanted, that she knew you'd be successful and wanted him to guide you." I laughed bitterly. "Guide me? He spent my whole childhood tearing me down." Chloe went quiet for a moment. "I don't know what to believe. I don't want this to tear us apart." Her words hit me hard. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed her until now. "Chloe, listen to me. I don't want this to come between us either. But Jack is manipulating you. He's always been good at that. Please, don't let him drag you into this mess." "I'll try," she said softly. "But it's complicated. He's my dad, Connor." "I know," I said, my voice heavy. "I know." The situation escalated faster than I expected. Marcus managed to get a copy of the so-called updated will, and it was worse than I'd feared. The document stated that Jack had been appointed as my legal guardian after my mom's death, with a clause that entitled him to a portion of any financial success I achieved while under his care. The problem? The will appeared authentic, complete with notarized signatures. "This doesn't make sense," I told Marcus as we went over the document in his office. "Why would my mom leave him something like this? She knew what he was like. She wouldn't trust him with anything. Unless he manipulated her," Marcus said grimly, "or forged it entirely. I've seen cases like this before. Family members coming out of the woodwork to claim a piece of the pie. But proving fraud is tricky." To make matters worse, Jack had started reaching out to people in my life. Hannah got a call from someone claiming to be a reporter, asking if the rumors about my family feud were true. Investors started asking questions about the legal situation. Jack was spreading the story, trying to make me look like the bad guy. Hannah and I fought about it one night. "You need to do something," she said, pacing our living room. "This is getting out of hand. He's dragging your name through the mud. What do you want me to do?" I snapped. "I'm already working with Marcus. It's not like I can just make him go away." "I know that," she said, her voice softening. "I just hate seeing you like this. He's getting under your skin, and that's exactly what he wants." She wasn't wrong. Jack was in my head, and it was driving me crazy. The breaking point came when Chloe called again, this time in tears. "I don't know what to do," she sobbed. "Dad's furious. He says you're trying to cut him out of what's rightfully his. He's threatening to stop paying for my tuition if I don't back him up." My heart broke. "Chloe, you don't owe him anything. He's using you to get to me." "But I can't lose my scholarship," she said, her voice trembling. "I've worked so hard to get here. If he cuts me off, I'm screwed." Anger surged through me. Jack wasn't just coming after me. He was using Chloe as a pawn in his twisted game. "I'll help you," I said firmly. "Whatever happens, I'll make sure you can finish school. Don't let him blackmail you into doing something you'll regret." She sniffled. "You mean that?" "Of course. You're my sister. I won't let him hurt you." Chloe didn't say much after that, but I could tell she was torn. Jack had a hold on her, just like he'd had on my mom. And now, I had to find a way to break it, before he destroyed everything I'd built. I couldn't shake the feeling that Jack had been planning this for years. His sudden reappearance, the conveniently timed, updated will, the pressure on Chloe. It all felt orchestrated, like he'd been waiting for me to succeed so he could swoop in and take his cut. Marcus was digging into the details of the will, but progress was slow. "These things take time," he kept saying. Time wasn't a luxury I had. Jack was already poisoning the well, and the strain was starting to show. Investors were starting to pull back, citing concerns about long-term stability. Rumors about the lawsuit were circulating in the industry, and my company's reputation was taking a hit. Jack knew exactly how to hurt me. But the worst part? He wasn't just targeting my career. He was targeting my family. It started with Chloe. She'd always been sweet and idealistic, the kind of person who wanted to see the best in everyone. I think that's why Jack had such an easy time manipulating her. After our last conversation, she'd been distant. Texts went unanswered, and when I called, I got her voicemail. I figured Jack had gotten to her, and I hated myself for not being able to protect her. Then, one evening, she showed up at my apartment. I opened the door to find her standing there, looking exhausted. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she'd been crying, and she was clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. "Chloe," I said, stunned. "What are you doing here? Are you okay?" She shook her head. "No, I'm not okay. I need to talk to you." I stepped aside, letting her in. Hannah was in the kitchen, and when she saw Chloe, she quickly made herself scarce, giving us space to talk. Chloe sat down on the couch, her hands trembling. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. "Dad's. He's out of control." "What happened?" I asked, sitting across from her. "He's been lying to me," she said, her voice cracking. "About everything. About Mom, about the will, about you." "What did he say?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "He said Mom wanted him to take care of you because she didn't think you could handle it on your own. That she left everything to him so he could guide you." I clenched my fists, anger boiling under the surface. "And you believed him?" "I didn't know what to believe," she said defensively. "But I started digging and, Connor, I found something." She pulled out her phone and opened a folder of scanned documents. I went through some of Mom's old papers. These are from the year before she died. There's nothing about an updated will, but there are emails between her and Dad. They were fighting about money. Mom was scared he was going to lose everything. My heart sank. "What do you mean, lose everything?" Chloe handed me her phone. "Read them." The emails painted a damning picture. Jack had been deep in debt, apparently from failed business ventures and gambling. He'd begged my mom for help, but she'd refused to touch her savings. One email stood out. "Asterisk Jack, I can't keep bailing you out. I need that money for Connor and Chloe's future. You promised you'd get help, but you haven't. I can't trust you anymore, asterisk. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This wasn't just about greed. It was about desperation. Jack hadn't just ruined his own life. He tried to drag my mom down with him. The next day, Marcus and I met to go over Chloe's findings. He was cautiously optimistic. This gives us a starting point, he said. If we can prove Jack was in financial trouble, it casts doubt on the legitimacy of the will. But we'll need more than this. Like what? I asked. Hard evidence. Bank records, witness statements, anything that shows he had a motive to forge the will. It wasn't much, but it was a lead. Marcus put his team to work, and I tried to focus on keeping my company afloat. But Jack wasn't done. He escalated his attacks, and this time, he made it personal. It started with a news article. A tech blog published a story about my family feud, complete with quotes from Jack about how I'd abandoned him and Chloe after my mom's death. He painted himself as a selfless stepfather who had sacrificed everything to raise me, only to be cast aside when I found success. The article went viral. Investors started pulling out of deals, employees started asking questions, and my public image took a hit. Jack had turned me into a villain, and I didn't know how to fight back. But the worst blow came when he involved Grace, his new girlfriend. I didn't know much about Grace, other than that she'd been dating Jack for a couple of years. She was polished and poised, the kind of woman who could sell you a car you didn't need and make you thank her for it. I hadn't given her much thought until she started popping up in interviews, backing Jack's claims. He's just trying to honor Rachel's wishes, she said in one interview. It's heartbreaking to see Connor treating his family this way. Her words were like poison, spreading doubt and suspicion. She wasn't just supporting Jack. She was actively undermining me, painting me as a greedy, ungrateful son who had turned his back on the man who raised him. It was a lie, but it was effective. Things came to a head when Marcus uncovered something huge. He called me late one night, his voice brimming with urgency. I've got something, he said. You're going to want to sit down for this. I grabbed a notepad and braced myself. What is it? Jack's been lying about the will. It wasn't notarized the way he claimed. The notary who signed it retired years ago, but I tracked her down. She says she never saw your mother's updated will. My heart raced. So it's a forgery? Not necessarily, Marcus said, but it's a red flag. If we can prove Jack forged the will, we can not only shut down his claim, but we can also go after him for fraud. It was the breakthrough I'd been waiting for. Jack's house of cards was starting to crumble, and I was ready to bring it all down. But before I could act, Jack made his next move. A move so bold, so devastating, that it changed everything. I thought I was ready for whatever Jack threw at me next. I was wrong. The morning after Marcus called with the news about the notary, I woke up to a firestorm. My phone buzzed relentlessly with calls, texts, and notifications. At first, I thought it was another round of investor panic or media fallout from Jack's antics. But this was different. The first message I opened was from Lauren, my assistant. Her text was short and alarming. Asterisk, you need to see this. It's everywhere. Asterisk, confused. I clicked the link she'd sent. It led to a tabloid article, and the headline hit me like a sledgehammer. Asterisk, family betrayal? Tech CEO Connor accused of financial abuse by stepfather. Asterisk. The article was brutal. Jack had gone on record, claiming I'd funneled money away from family accounts during my early years of building my company, leaving him and Chloe to fend for themselves. Grace had chimed in, too, alleging that I'd made false promises to support them once I became successful, only to abandon them. The story was a complete fabrication, but it was written in a way that made it sound believable. And the worst part? Jack had released photos of me from my early 20s, pictures I didn't even know existed. One showed me sleeping in my car, looking disheveled. Another was from a party, with me holding a drink in one hand and flipping off the camera with the other. Out of context, they painted a picture of recklessness and immaturity. The article suggested that I'd squandered family money on my wild lifestyle. The timing couldn't have been worse. Investors were already skittish, and this pushed some of them over the edge. By noon, my company's stock had taken a significant hit. Employees were emailing me, asking for clarification. Even Hannah, who'd been my rock through all of this, looked shaken. "You need to issue a statement," she said, pacing the living room. "This is bad, Connor. Really bad." "I know," I said, rubbing my temples. "But what do I even say? My stepfather is a liar, and here's why? That'll just make me look defensive." Hannah stopped pacing and sat down beside me. "You have to fight back. Jack's trying to ruin you. You can't just sit here and let him win." She was right. But how? I called Marcus, who was already in damage control mode. He'd been tracking Jack's movements, trying to piece together a timeline of events that would discredit him. "We need to be strategic," he said. "If we come out swinging without concrete proof, it'll look like you're trying to cover something up." "What about the notary?" I asked. "You said she never saw the will. Can we use that?" "We can," he said, "but we need more. Something that proves Jack's intentions beyond a shadow of a doubt." I slammed my fist on the table in frustration. "What more do we need? He's lying. He's been lying this whole time." "Connor," Marcus said calmly, "I know this is frustrating, but we're building a case, not a story for the tabloids. Trust me, we'll get him." But trusting Marcus wasn't easy when Jack was out there dismantling my life piece by piece. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, Chloe. She showed up at my office unannounced, looking more determined than I'd ever seen her. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice steady. I ushered her into my office and closed the door. "What's going on?" "I've been staying with Dad and Grace," she said, sitting down across from me. "I've been listening, watching, and I found something you need to see." She pulled out her phone and opened a recording app. "I recorded them talking last night. Grace didn't know I was there." She handed me the phone, and I pressed play. The audio was a little muffled, but I could clearly hear Grace's voice. "This is going to work," she said confidently. "Connor's already on the ropes. A few more leaks, and he'll be begging to settle." Jack's voice cut in. "He'll settle. He has no choice. Once the courts see the will, he's done." Grace laughed. "And the best part? He doesn't even know the will is fake." My heart stopped. I rewound the recording and played it again. They'd admitted it. The will was fake. Jack had lied to everyone, including Chloe, about its legitimacy. "Chloe, this is huge," I said, my hands shaking as I set the phone down. "Do you realize what you've done?" She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I couldn't let him keep hurting you. Or me. Or Mom's memory." I hugged her, a wave of relief washing over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had the upper hand. Armed with Chloe's recording, Marcus and I prepared to take Jack down. He filed an emergency motion to have the will declared fraudulent, submitting the recording as evidence. But before we could make our move, Jack struck again. This time, he went after Hannah. Hannah had been by my side through everything, but Jack knew how to exploit even the strongest bonds. He contacted her directly, claiming he had proof that I'd hidden money from her. He sent her emails, poorly doctored but convincing enough to make her pause, and even tried to arrange a meeting. I didn't respond. She told me when she showed me the emails. "But Connor, what if people believe this? What if they think you're hiding something?" "They'll believe it if we let them," I said firmly. "But we're not going to let them," Hannah nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. Jack had planted a seed, and even though she trusted me, the strain was starting to show. The final confrontation came in court. Jack walked in with his lawyer and Grace by his side, looking smug as ever, but he didn't know what we had. Marcus presented Chloe's recording as evidence, along with the testimony from the notary who confirmed she'd never authenticated the will. It was a 1-2 punch that left Jack's lawyer scrambling. Jack tried to play it cool, but as the judge listened to the recording, his confidence faltered. Grace's voice echoed through the courtroom. Asterisk, and the best part? He doesn't even know the will is fake. Asterisk. By the time Marcus finished his closing argument, Jack's fate was sealed. The judge ruled in my favor, declaring the will fraudulent and dismissing Jack's claims. He even hinted at potential criminal charges for Jack and Grace. When it was over, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Jack had lost, but the victory was bittersweet. He'd done so much damage, and it would take time to rebuild my reputation and my relationships. Chloe and I hugged outside the courthouse. "Thank you," I said, "for everything." She smiled through tears. "I just wanted to do the right thing. For you. For Mom." Hannah wrapped her arms around me as we walked away, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. But Jack's shadow would linger. He taught me a harsh lesson about family, trust, and betrayal. And while I'd won this battle, I knew I'd never forget the scars he left behind. Walking out of the courthouse that day, I felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Jack had lost, his fraudulent will exposed for what it was. But victory didn't feel as sweet as I'd imagined. The damage he'd caused was far-reaching, and picking up the pieces would take time. Hannah and I drove home in silence, her hand resting on mine as she steered through the late afternoon traffic. She'd been my rock through all of this, but I could tell the ordeal had taken its toll on her, too. Jack's manipulation had shaken us, forcing us to confront questions we never thought we'd have to ask. Was our trust as unshakable as we believed? Could our relationship survive the fallout? "I'm sorry," I said suddenly, breaking the quiet. Hannah glanced at me, her brow furrowed. "For what?" "For dragging you into this mess," I said. "For letting Jack get under my skin. For everything." She smiled softly, squeezing my hand. "Connor, this wasn't your fault. Jack's the one who did this, not you. You don't have to apologize for his actions." Her words should have comforted me, but the guilt lingered. Jack's lies had seeped into every part of my life, even planting seeds of doubt in the one person I thought would always believe in me. I knew it would take time for us to fully heal, but at least we were still standing. The fallout for Jack and Grace came swiftly. With the courts ruling against him, Jack's fraudulent scheme became public knowledge. The media that had eagerly lapped up his fabricated sob story now turned on him, exposing his lies and financial misdeeds. Grace, who had been so confident in her role as Jack's accomplice, quickly distanced herself from him, giving an exclusive interview where she claimed she'd been misled by Jack and had no idea the will was fake. It was a pathetic attempt to save face, and no one bought it. Grace's involvement in the recording was undeniable, and within weeks, she lost her job and any remaining credibility. Jack, on the other hand, faced far more serious consequences. Marcus had filed a motion to pursue criminal charges for fraud and forgery, and while the case was still pending, it was clear that Jack's legal troubles were just beginning. As for Chloe, she decided to move out of Jack's house and cut ties with him completely. "I can't believe I ever trusted him," she told me over coffee one afternoon. "He lied to me, used me, and tried to ruin your life. I can't forgive that." I felt a swell of pride for my little sister. She'd been through so much, but she'd come out stronger on the other side. "You don't have to deal with him anymore," I said. "You've got me now. Whatever you need, I'm here." She smiled, and for the first time in years, it felt like we were finally rebuilding the bond we'd lost. But Jack wasn't done yet. A week after the court ruling, Marcus called with unsettling news. "Jack's filed an appeal," he said. "An appeal?" I repeated, incredulous. "On what grounds?" "His lawyer is arguing that the recording was obtained illegally and shouldn't have been admissible in court." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. "So what does this mean? Do I have to go through all of this again?" "Not necessarily," Marcus said. "Appeals are tricky, and it's unlikely a higher court will overturn the ruling. But we can't ignore it. I'll handle the paperwork, but you should prepare yourself. Jack's desperate, and desperate people do stupid things." Marcus was right. Over the next few weeks, Jack made several attempts to stir up trouble. He gave interviews to anyone who would listen, claiming he'd been wrongfully accused and insisting that the legal system was biased against him. But his words fell on deaf ears. The public had seen through his charade, and the backlash was swift. Social media was flooded with posts condemning Jack, calling him everything from a con artist to a narcissist. Even his old friends began to distance themselves, unwilling to be associated with his sinking ship. Jack's appeal was dismissed within a month, and with it, any remaining hope he had of salvaging his scheme. But even then, he refused to take responsibility for his actions. The last time I saw Jack was at a coffee shop near my office. I was there for a meeting when I spotted him sitting in the corner, nursing a cup of black coffee. He looked different, tired, disheveled and beaten down. For a moment, I considered walking away, but something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the need for closure. Either way, I found myself standing in front of him. "Connor," he said, looking up with a weak smile. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Jack," I said coldly. "What are you doing here?" "Just thinking," he said, gesturing to the empty table in front of him. "About everything." I crossed my arms. "And what have you come up with?" He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I made mistakes. I'll admit that. But I'm not the villain you think I am." I laughed bitterly. "You forged a will, tried to steal everything I've worked for, and dragged Chloe into your mess. What do you call that, if not villainy?" Jack didn't respond, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of regret in his eyes. But then he shook his head. "You don't understand, Connor. I was trying to survive. Your mother, she always believed in you. I thought if I could just get a piece of that success, I could—" "Stop," I said sharply. "Just stop. Mom believed in me because she saw me for who I was, not as a means to an end. You were supposed to protect her, not exploit her. And you sure as hell didn't protect Chloe." Jack flinched at the mention of Chloe's name, but he didn't argue. "I've lost everything," he said quietly. "Grace is gone. Chloe won't talk to me. And you hate me." I didn't hate him. Not anymore. What I felt was something closer to pity. Jack had spent his entire life chasing something. Money, power, validation, and now he had nothing to show for it. "I don't hate you, Jack," I said, my voice steady. "But I'll never forgive you for what you did to Mom, or to me, or to Chloe." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Jack to sit alone with his regrets. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding. My company stabilized, my reputation recovered, and my relationship with Hannah grew stronger than ever. Chloe and I stayed close, and I made good on my promise to help her finish college. She graduated with honors, and seeing her walk across that stage was one of the proudest moments of my life. As for Jack, he faded into obscurity. The last I heard, he'd moved to a small town upstate, far away from the life he'd tried to steal. I don't know if he ever found peace, but I'd stopped caring. I had my life back, and I wasn't going to waste another second dwelling on him. In the end, Jack's betrayal taught me something important. Family isn't defined by blood or titles. It's defined by the people who stand by you, who lift you up instead of tearing you down. And while Jack had tried to destroy me, he'd failed. Because no matter how much he took, he couldn't take away the people who truly mattered, or the life I'd built from nothing. I'd won. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.